This podcast was recorded February 2nd, 2019. This is podcast number 25 called Communication. In this podcast, I wanted to talk about communication styles and the way to communicate and how it affects us in anxiety and how it affects us even with the OCD. In the work that I do, when I work with somebody, I do talk about communication because I believe that communication is a anxiety driver if it's not being done right. If one person is at a level that's up here, and you can't see my hand, of course, but it's up high, and if another one is down low, and they're not communicating, they're not hitting base with each other, and anxiety starts to come in because of, whether it be guilt feelings come in, anger feelings come in, because what she said or what he said doesn't make sense, or it came across in the wrong way. And when I talk about communication, really, we talk about verbal, but we also talk about written, and even body language really could be considered in communication styles and communication forms. And each one has its ups and its downs, or its benefits and its cons. Um, so I guess we'll talk a little bit about each of them because they do play into each other, and they do play into OCD for definitely, for sure, because one is the way we talk to someone that is suffering from OCD can make a huge difference in their response and whether you raise anxiety or lower anxiety. What you say, as a couple of examples with my daughter, um, was one of the things that we found with her is that when she first got into it, there were certain words that were triggers for her, including the letters OCD or the words obsessive compulsive disorder. And so um, she we could not speak those words. Now, what that poses for it is a problem because that's compensation or a compulsion we're doing for her is we're allowing her not to hear those words when they're triggers, and of course that's really feeding OCD instead of helping it. But of course, when you're first getting into it or when you're first realizing that what you're going through with OCD, you're doing things that you have to do, and part of it is, okay, right now, we won't say those words, but we're going to have to work on them. And that's kind of the address I would say you need to take with it. Because until they start working on things, it's going, it's going to cause a problem. They need reassurance. And, as another example with my daughter is she would follow us around, not just me, but she did it with me. She would follow us around after we came out of the bathroom to make sure that we washed our hands and would ask us over and over and over, "Did you wash your hands, Dad? Did you wash your hands, Mom? Did you, you know, would not let us up." And so, communicating to her at that point was a difficult task. And again, there were two sides to it. If you went down one side and responded, "Yes, I did," then we fed OCD. If we said, if we just shut up and didn't say anything, which is what we really worked on and tried to do, she would not let up. And if we said no, of course, that would just send her into a tirade. So it was a tough communication at the very beginning, and really for a while in the verbal words we used. Um, and so sometimes it was important, to emphasize to her or to emphasize to the person with OCD that, this is the way that the structure of healing is supposed to be is that we're not supposed to reassure you on that. So I'm not answering you. But that, like I say, so that's part of then going into ERP is how you handle that. And so we're not going to go into ERP because there is a podcast specifically to that. Um, so so there's a lot of communication. Um, not con- that- another communication problem or situation is when the person comes at you angrily, cursing at you or telling you lies or whatever, is to learn how to respond there too, or not respond to keep your own calm or cool, down, is very important. So, talk therapy is, talk therapy, talk communication, verbal communication is vitally important to handling the OCD, anxiety, and learning how to do that is a big key to that. Um, Now, with text and written communication, text I haven't seen anybody that's had issues with that as far as OCD goes, but we'll come back to text for other reasons. Um, but in written communication, some of the same thing was happening with us, with my daughter. You couldn't write the letters OCD. You couldn't write about certain things, and I'm not going to go into specifics about it, but you couldn't use words that that were about the triggers that were out there. So it was there too. It was very important of how you communicated with notes or writings that you left out. If you were writing something, you left it out, and she read it. So you had to watch that kind of communication. Body language, I think, has a communicative effect. Even for OCD, I think how we would stand, would also intimidate and cause anger. If I stood like with my, arms at my hips, or with my fist at my hips with my arms sticking out in kind of a military stance, I guess you'd say, that would be intimidating to not only to OCD but anybody. Um, so it's in communication with really with any special needs or disorders can play a huge role in what happens. One of the forms of OCD, not officially or anything, but one that has a lot of characteristics like OCD is misophonia, which is the sound has to do with sounds that trigger OCD-like behaviors. Um, and I've run into a couple of clients like that where one where they couldn't tolerate their mother's voice. So her verbal communication was a problem. Um, and there's others that the clicking sound the mouth makes when it opens causes them to go into a lot of anger and tirades. So verbal communication, I think, can play on um, a lot of different situations. So one thing I wanted to talk about is just recently, um, my wife and my wife's an occupational therapist. She has joined in with me to do to work and to help families, especially parents, uh, find out ways to be able to handle behavior issues differently, more holistically, naturally, I guess. I don't know what would be the good or best way to term that, but do it in a much more conscious way, I guess, and so we've done some work this uh, with the author of the book How to Talk So Kids Will Listen and Listen So Kids Will Talk, Adele Faber and Elaine Maislish. I'm really mainly have been working with their office, I should say. I've never met either one. Elaine unfortunately passed away, I believe. I don't know the time frame when that was, but Adele is still around, but I have not met her. I've talked actually with her daughter. But in their books, they talk about um, their big thing is about respectful communication. And they start out talking about validation of feelings. Too much of the time when we as parents have a child that comes at us with different scenarios, maybe angry, maybe upset, we try to come in and fix it. We ignore the feelings and just jump to, well, you need to just do this, or, you know, you that's not, or the other part is just denial in itself. You know, you you can't be feeling that. You must be kidding. Or they try to give you advice of how to get past it instead of just taking time to listen to what their feelings are in what they're saying. With responses like, "Wow, you're really upset. What can I do? What can I do to help you?" Or, "Wow, you're really upset. I'd like to know more." Uh, it's it's staying out of the solving of their problems. Now, they may want you to help out, but it's really best to wait for them to ask you to um, to help them. Because what happens in denial of feelings and not listening to the feelings and not addressing and appreciating the feelings that somebody's going through and stopping them dead in their tracks with what they're saying and saying, well, that can't be true. You can't be. What it does, it kind of has two two responses, maybe more, that can happen for the child. First can be um, them taking it on themselves, blaming themselves. Oh, well, I must be wrong then. It must be my fault that this is going on because those feelings can't be right. I got to stop worrying about my feelings. So they can turn on themselves, turn it in on themselves when the parent rejects listening to their feelings or denies or uh, tries to move past without really listening to it. The other side of that, what they can also do, and or I guess it would be, begin to build up resentment towards the parent. Well, I'll show them next time. I'll get away with whatever it was, or something of that sort. And don't you don't really want to do that as a parent because that resentment starts showing up many times in the teen years with anger. It also can lead to disgruntled kids that want to get out, that run away, that just fight you tooth and nail. And a lot of people think, well, if I hear their feelings out, you know, I'm just that's going to take forever. It's going to be a long drawn out. I'd have to listen to them over, and that's really not true. When I was dealing with my daughter with her OCD, our battles, our arguments could go on for hours. Whereas if I took the time to listen to her. Now, let me make a disclaimer there. There were times when what she was saying just was so off the charts, and there really wasn't a matter of using a listening response, but just most of the time something like that, it was better just to shut up and just let her go on. But the other times, if I fought it or denied it or distracted from it or didn't listen to her feelings, and I see this with parents I work with, doing the same thing, that argument can go a lot longer than what it takes to listen, validate, and work from there. I've seen arguments go down in a matter of seconds from escalated anxiety way up here, way up in the sky, to coming down to a calmer place to be able to talk about it. So, you know, this book, the How to Talk to So Kids Will Listen book, really goes into and explains how to really do that. And in fact, we're working on workshops that are coming up actually in March of this year. And if you want to find out about workshops in this, I'll make a little plug here, but go to focushealthyfamily.com and you will find our as we go through the years here, we're going to be posting on there when the dates of these different workshops are. But um, in that book, they really dig into that and how to do it, how it works, and it works so well. It works for a lot of reasons. And on top of that, as I believe I talked about in another podcast, my wife and I also went through, probably 20 some years ago or more, probably almost 25 years ago, we went through counseling that helped teach us this process that's part of the imago therapy. And in the imago therapy, they do a thing that I call mirroring. It's also called reflective listening, where they teach that process. And I believe I went through it in one of the other podcasts. So I'll go through it very quickly here. It was set up for couples, but it works very well in a one-way situation. But in a couple situation, you have one person that has a problem with the other person. The other person has to agree to be able to just listen and mirror back what the other person is saying. They can't judge it, they can't rebuke it or anything like that. They just have to listen to it, mirror it back. So the person with the problem comes to them, asks them if they would be willing to dialogue with them, which is what the process is kind of called also. And the other person has to agree. And then the person that has the problem starts stating the problem. When you do this, I feel. They use I statements in doing it. The other person just said, so what I'm hearing you say is that when I did this, you felt this. Is that correct? So they just go through this process of all they do is mirror back. No judgment, no added things to it, no trying to fix it, anything. And then they go through a whole process of, the person says, is that correct? The person says either yes or no, and if it says no, then he has to try again. Once they get past and there isn't anything else to add to that particular statement, then they go through a process of summarizing it, validating, and empathizing with it. And it works so beautifully. We've really found that using this method cuts down the argument time frame and makes each person feel heard. So it's rather important to um, understand how strong communication can play in anxiety if it's not done right. If you're not listened to, if you're not feeling like you're heard, then it causes problems. So, like I say, a couple of things we want to do in communication is validate the feelings. Without uh, and number two, staying out of solving it. So really listen. Not worried about the next thing you're going to say, but just really listening and understanding or trying to understand. Now, the whole process doesn't mean you have to agree. It just means you're validating this is how you're feeling. Because what a person is feeling is really true to them. You can't say, well, you don't feel that, because that doesn't work. Um, and one of the things you want to do, this is a little off base, but you really want to stay out of the place of of wishing for we could be let back like the past, and that just causes time. That makes a person feel like they're not really here. Now, um, a couple of things that uh, I thought of based on some work I've done um, of some things, examples of things you normally would say and how you might say them differently. Like when you're ready to give out advice about what to do, like with OCD, if you're going to tell the person with OCD how they should do it, it instead of saying, this is what you need to do, you would say something like, how do you think we should do this? How do you think we should go through this? Now, it doesn't hurt for you to explain this is what the therapist asked us to do. In fact, you could say the therapist has asked us to go through this ERP, look at all these triggers we wrote down, and then start working through them with ERP. And then you could say, how do you think we should go through this or start this or whatever? Another thing that, another thing that you might have said, or here's what you need to do next. This is what you need to do. Okay, so this is what you need to do. Again, we always want to put the power back into the child because they are the ones that need to solve this. They are the ones that need to work through this and change this. We can do all we can do, but we can't really change OCD. We really can't change that anxiety. We really can't change ADHD. We have to let them do it. That is so much more powerful. So instead of saying, here's what you need to do next, here's the next thing you need to do, what do you plan to do now? Or what would you like to plan next based on what we've talked about? All right, and things like sarcasm and some of this stuff is really negative. So something like, that's really stupid. I that was dumb the way all these different. Here's what, or another one. I'm disappointed in your behavior. Another thing you can say instead of those things would be, this really isn't like you. What's going on? So, like I said, communication to me is extremely important and has to be taken seriously because it is a vital part of uh, what you do to help get past anxiety. Because clearing your energy, which is the EFT part, and getting good communication can make a huge difference in how things happen. So I hope this has helped you some in understanding communication. There is a lot more. Oh, one thing I do want to add in here is the idea of text. Text to me are tough communication because you can't tell emotional there. You can't tell whether the person's smiling saying that or they're really angry. I mean, sometimes you can tell by the capital letters, but you can so easily misinterpret words. In saying things as well as writing things as well as texting things. And that's a tough place to go. So I think we have to take into consideration some points of how to deal um, with the with the situation if the only way we have to do it is text. And again, there I would use a lot of I statements. I would stay out of it. I would only walk into a situation of writing a text when you're in a good place. So tapping your way to a calmer place so that you don't come across with capitals and words that you don't really want in there. So I hope this little snippet about communication is good for you. I hope it helps. And I'll say keep tapping and keep trying. Take care.